Hi everybody, my name is Larsen. We all have solos that we love and we dream of being able to play solos like that. And mostly the advice that then follows is that you have to transcribe it and learn it and in that way get it into your playing. But there is actually a problem with this because if you're transcribing a solo, then you're going to be really busy with a lot of details. It's of course interesting to check out all these details, but you might also be losing a lot of important information. In general, it's maybe not that important whether it's an E or an E flat on the 3 end in bar 27. Maybe it's much more important to realize that all the phrases are short or that the soloist is developing motifs or using groupings of triplets. Don't get me wrong, I think you can learn a lot from transcribing solos, and I think you should keep that as a part of your practice routine. But in this video I'm going to focus on some of the things that you can learn just by listening to a solo and not really thinking about exactly what the phrases are, but just listening for some more general information, and I think you'll find that you can learn really a lot from that. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar, improve the way that you solo, check out some interesting arpeggios or chord voicings, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to make sure not to miss anything, then click the little bell notification icon next to the subscribe button. Making this video also gave me the chance to use my favorite Jim Hall quote, so that's kind of a bonus. How long are the phrases? Now, of course, different artists will play different phrases, and being aware of what kind of phrases they're using, so you have an idea about how long the phrases are, the density of them, then that's really going to tell you a lot about how they play. And that's also why you can tell that John McLaughlin and Wes Montgomery have completely different playing styles in some ways. If you listen to John McLaughlin playing an 8-note line like this, so he's really relying on playing longer 8th note lines. He's not really repeating things. He has a lot of shifting on top of the form, and he's just changing colors along the way. And if you compare this to how Wes will play shorter phrases and then use the phrases to create the next phrase, and in that way really create a larger context in his playing, then you have a completely different type of solo. Being aware of this and working with this when you're improvising yourself can really help you practice more constructively towards playing like somebody or getting an aspect of somebody's playing into your own playing, because you can work on it while you're improvising. You don't have to really transcribe anything or work with a transcription to check this out. What is happening with the rhythm? There's a lot that you can learn from just being aware of what kind of rhythms are being used and what is happening rhythmically in a solo. In jazz, the main rhythmical subdivision, from a traditional point of view at least, is going to be 8 notes. And you can hear solos that are only using 8 notes. And of course these can be great solos, but you can also hear other artists who will use other subdivisions in their solos. For instance, here's Herbie Hancock using some triplets. What you hear here is that he's not only using 8th note triplets on a medium swing groove, but he's also using some triplet groupings. So he's not just playing the triplets just 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. He's playing some different, actually he changes the groovings along the way, and then in that way creating some tension by having some patterns that are moving on top of the beat. Now this may require some training to be able to recognize, but it's well worth checking out. And of course, if you're only playing 8 notes, you can still make some interesting groupings like this. Another thing that you want to be aware of when it comes to rhythm and timing is whether people are playing laid back or really just in the groove, or they're playing a little bit in front, because that's also really saying a lot about how the solo sounds. And you might want to mimic sort of the feel that you prefer, and you want to have the control to also choose where you're lying on the beat. Is it bebop lines or vocal-like melodies? Actually, this is something that you'll probably hear a soloist do both in one solo. So maybe there's going to be a part that has a more vocal-like melody and another part that's much more playing sort of the bop lines and really digging into the groove and spelling out the changes. It is something you want to be aware of what is happening, and it's sometimes not that important to know that the soloist is playing an A and then a C, but also just to realize the fact that there are maybe 2 bars between those 2 notes. One of my favorites when it comes to playing more vocal-like solos is Paul Desmond. And when he solos, it often sounds like this. as a contrast to this, you can hear how Metheny is really relying on 8th note lines in this fragment. I guess if you want to play like Paul Desmond, then you also have to practice improvising melodies like that, and that means that you don't focus on playing altered dominants on 2-5-1s, but focus more on really trying to play melodies that sound like these vocal-like, or more like the melody of a standard, and try to keep that in mind when you're trying to practice. And of course, if you want to play 8th note lines like Metheny, then you just have to practice, and practice really a lot. How is the development of the solo? Most solos will have some sort of development from the beginning to the end, and there's going to be some sort of dynamic difference between the two. But I think in what we consider mainstream jazz, actually a lot of solos don't really have that. There's not a huge difference between where they start and where they end. Of course, that doesn't have to be the case. That's a part of the style. We don't always need that. We don't always need a huge explosion of energy in the middle or in the ending of a solo. Because that kind of operatic dynamics kind of also belong somewhere else than mainstream jazz. But there is always some sort of development, and you want to be aware of what is happening, also because that's going to tell you something about what kind of melodies, what kind of improvisation you're going to do in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end. An example of somebody who pretty much always has the same build-up of his solos and that we all love is Montgomery, because he'll start with single notes. Then he'll go to octaves, and he'll end with chords. The reason that I can keep on publishing videos every week is that I have a community of people over on Patreon that are supporting the channel. I'm very grateful for that, and I don't think it would be possible for me to make all these jazz guitar videos without them. If you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. If you join us over on Patreon, I can also give you something in return for your support. Is it in the groove or floating over it? When you're improvising, you can of course choose to really log in with the rhythm section so that everything that you're playing is related to the people playing behind you. You're playing the same subdivision, you're playing the same type of feel, and you're really the entire band trying to convey the same groove. But you can also choose to just be more free and then say that the rhythm section is there to convey the groove and you're floating on top of it, so that there's a contrast between what you're doing and what they're playing. And I think you'll find that a lot of soloists will do both. So in one solo you might have one part that's floating on top and another part where they're really locking in. And those are the kind of things that you want to be aware of, and that you want to hear how people work with this, because it's an important part of how people sound. Because you can hear here like Joe Pass will really lock in with the groove. And Allan Holdsworth can also really log in with the groove, but he can also really float on top like this. Are the phrases connected, and how? It's important to also be aware of in a solo how the different phrases are connected to each other, if they are connected. You will have some artists who will take one phrase and then they will stick with that and mold that for the entire solo, and in that way create a larger context. But you also have a lot of other artists who will keep on exploring and have a really new, fresh flow of new ideas happening all the time. Both approaches can work really well. To me, somebody who's traditional, who really works a lot with molding phrases, is Montgomery. But at the same time, I also really love how Martino has this incredible flow of new ideas happening through his lines. How is the soloist using space? Often the use of space in solos is really reduced to just something that we do to create some sort of build-up in a solo. So you begin a solo by using a lot of space, and then you make a build-up by starting to play more and more notes and making the lines denser and the phrases longer. But I think you're kind of selling the concept a little bit short. And I think if you also start to really listen for how other, and especially great artists, will use space in their solos, then you can also hear that you can actually use space to also create tension, like this John Abercrombie solo. And his playing right here really gives a new dimension to my favorite Jim Hall quote that I already talked about, which is, don't just play something, sit there. If you want to check out another video on some of the things that you have to keep in mind and to be aware of when you're trying to learn jazz, then check out this video where I'm going over the 10 commandments of learning jazz guitar. If this is the first time you see one of my videos and you want to learn more about jazz guitar, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. That's about it for this time. Thank you for watching, and until next time.